Hello, hi y'all. I would tell you that David Wolfe changed my life, and let's go deeper, more honest. I said it's an understatement. It really is an understatement. Now, how, where? Okay, tiny bit about me, in case you don't know who I am. Daniel Aaron. I'm an author, a coach. I'm speaking to you right now from where I live, my home office on Maui in Hawaii. And hey, look, that's the first way, right? I started working with David Wolfe 20 something years ago, traveled the world together for 2 years straight. He was at that point a raw food guru, best-selling author, and in many ways known as the leader of that industry, raw foods, superfoods, nutrition. And he was leading seminars and giving talks and retreats. And he recruited me to work with him. And I said, okay, I'll tell you about that in a moment. And in those 2 years, amongst our travels around the world, one of the places he brought me. Now, look, I'm a kid, somewhat of a poor, lower middle class kid from Maine, right? For me, when I was a kid, Hawaii was like, that was as glamorous as the Beverly Hillbillies. Like, no, I didn't know people that went to Hawaii. That was like the epitome of success. And somewhere along the way in my journey with David, he said, we got a retreat coming up in Maui. I want you to come and do the yoga and the breathwork part with me. And great. Okay. In. First time I came to Maui was with David to lead a retreat. Blew my mind. I'd never been to the tropics. So many foods, so much. I look out here because I can see the ocean. That's where I live now. Right? This island is where my daughter was born. Now, here's how I met David. I had already learned about raw food, and I'd gotten into it. I was in, but I was kind of dabbling. I knew about it. I went to a lecture. I was living in Miami at the time. Went to a lecture, and I was like, holy moly, this guy's like, whew, such energy and information and clear and intelligent and entertaining. I was like, wow. And that lecture clicked me over. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it out. I'm going to go 100% raw and see what happens. And things started happening. My life started changing in miraculous ways. Well, 3 months later, I had been living in Holland. No, actually, I wasn't living there yet. I had just done a 2-week intensive at a place called Humaniversity. Strange place. Part ashram, part addiction recovery center, part university. And I'd gone there a few times, and then I went for a deep dive into a very intense program, very cathartic, intense therapies they did there. By the time I reached the end of the program, I was like, that's it. I'm moving here. This is the next part of my evolution. Know something about me. I'm a bit of a nutcase when it comes to personal, spiritual, and professional development. Even before I met David, though David accelerated things for me with that, before I met him, I was obsessed with this. I'd had a spiritual knock on the head back in 1995, and I knew the only thing that mattered, the thing that mattered most was me, quote, awakening. And at this point, 30 years later, I have invested more than $700,000 in that education with the best teachers, guides, gurus, mentors, coaches that I can find and personally work with in the world. Now, I was coming back from my intense 2 weeks over there at Humaniversity. And so that's it. I'm moving here. I had planned to go back to Omega Institute and live there and live and work there again. I landed in New York, and I had a clear intention. I got one night, one morning in New York, and then I'm going up north, going to sell my camper, my trailer, give my notice at Omega, and then I'm moving to Humaniversity in 3 weeks. In the meantime, I'm going to make a whole bunch of money, and that's going to take care of it. So I land in New York, right? Have a go stay with a friend. Great. Next morning, I got 2 things on my agenda. I'm going to go to the vegan shoe store. Went there, got some really cool shoes. And then I'm going to go to my favorite raw food place in the world, called, oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've been there. Lower East Village, Raw. It'll come back to me. Beautiful, beautiful little cafe, and it was like one of those just coming spring days in New York, where the sun is shining and it's warm, and people are like, life again, right? And I'm walking down the street, and I'm just glowing. I'm like, I walk all the way down like 50 blocks to get to the cafe. Life. Oh, I almost came to me the name. Anyway, I get to the cafe, and as I'm going to walk in, they've got 2 tables outside. One is fully occupied. One has 4 seats and 3 just beautiful, glowing women sitting in those seats. And I say to myself, man, I'd like to take that 4th seat. And I was too shy. I was like, I couldn't quite get myself to do it. So I'm walking in. And Quintessence, that's the name of the place. I don't even know if they're still there. I'm walking in, and just as I'm walking in, I look over, and one of the 3 women says, hey, do you want to sit with us? I was like, yes. Okay. So sat down with them, had an amazing meal. I was like, it's going to be a quick meal. I'm getting on the train going up to Omega. Well, we started talking. Turns out we knew people in common. Found out they were there in New York because they work with David. And so we're hanging. I'm like, oh, what's that like? And you're in the raw food world. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, you want to come back to where we're staying? We're having a party tonight. Meet David. I'm like, okay, I can go to New York. I can go upstate tomorrow. So I go. David and I clicked, hit it off right away. Had an amazing time. That night, he's like, hey, you want to come to my event? Come to my event as my guest tomorrow. I was like, well, I guess I could delay one more day. So I go to the event. And now it's a different story because I'm hanging out with the crew, and I'm back there, and I'm learning different things, and having great friendships with them, and trying the different foods and the superfoods. And by the end of that, David's like, hey, we're going up to an event in New Hampshire. You want to go with us tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, I do. And I was something that I've been blessed with in my life. So like, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to do what I love. I was like, I'll figure it out. I know I need to take care of this stuff at Omega and sell this stuff. And I know I need to get out on the road and make some money. Anyway, turned out I traveled with them for the next 2.5 weeks straight. One event after another, adventures, incredible raw food restaurants, but amazing people. And it was a party the whole time. And I don't mean party like, when I was in college, party was like drinking beer and passing out and that kind of silliness. It was fun, alive, joyous party that enhanced life rather than detracted from it. And that's one of the first ways I'll mention beyond Hawaii. My second way that being with David changed my life, because I saw the possibility of not only living life as an adventure and as a party, which I'd kind of been doing, right? And I'd already been an entrepreneur and doing my own businesses for some years. However, what I saw with him is can bring passion and fun and joy, not only bring that to a business, actually, that's what empowers it and enlivens it. Right? So amazing time over those weeks. And finally, all right, see you later. They were going back to California. It's like, okay, I went and took care of business. I don't even remember now how I figured it out, but I figured out how to, manage my money enough that I flew back to Holland, moved into Humanity. I sold my trailer, finished at Omega, and then I dove into intense life at Humanity. That's another story for another time. 2 months into that, David and I kept up a little bit of correspondence by email. He's like, hey, I'm coming to London for an event. You want to come join us? I'm like, it's a short flight. Checked it out. I could get a little bit of time off from Humanity. So it's like, yeah, let's do it. Okay, why not? So flew over there for the event, right? And I was so excited, because I'm going to hang out with the friends again, and I'm having an adventure like at that point, and I was so deep in the hard intensity of Humanity. I was just like, So get in London and take the tube, get to the event. It's a lecture at a university he's doing. And I get there, and I walk in a little bit late, so I just walk in. There's one empty seat. I walk in, and David's already started his lecture, and he just pauses. Big room of people, must have been 100 people. He's like, "Hey, Daniel's here, and good to see you." And I was like, "Gosh, I feel really special, acknowledged." Anyway, I won't tell you about that. That led to some other adventures. We ended up going to a retreat down the south part of England, and whole adventures there. A week later, David sends me a message and says, "Hey, I have a raw food tour through the Midwest coming up. Do you want to come work with me? It'll be 3.5 weeks." And I'm thinking, raw food tour through the Midwest? What does that even mean? Right? I don't know. And it happened to be like my time at Human University was ending. And I listened and I felt and I heard and I was like, yeah. And I went. And that began 2 years of us working together, traveling the world, me assisting him with events. He offered me a full-time job. And I said, one condition. That is, when you speak on stage, which is what he did every day, I want to be the one that introduces you. And I want you to give me feedback, because something I knew, and I'm not even sure, so just intuitive, but I knew, well, I saw he was an amazing speaker. And somehow I knew that where my life was going was speaking. So he said, yeah, cool. So there's another way that he changed my life, because the feedback and the education that I got from him on the whole thing and how to run that adventurous business and how to lead people in groups and guide them and uplift them and inspire them through speaking, right, has become a huge part of my life. So in those 2 years, what else? I'll tell you this. Eating, food, right now. All that I've invested, been with some of the best teachers and mentors of all kinds in the world, yoga teachers, language teachers, writing teachers, right? African drumming, right? Dance, so many things when I lived at Omega and Esalen. And I've long maintained that the most important teachers I've had are the ones that taught me how to do the most simple things like eat. And that's a huge thing that I learned from David. What to eat, what not to eat, how to eat. And I grew up as a fat kid, right? With not only a fat kid, a distorted body image, so many challenges and issues with what I ate and guilt and obsession about it. Struggled with that for years. I mean, really decades, well into my 20s before I actually got fit. And then into my 30s before I realized I was fit and could see myself that way. So starting to work with David, talking about food and nutrition, traveling the world with him, and meeting the most advanced, innovative nutrition superfood people in the world was such an education. And it was also such a confrontation for me with what I knew, with my beliefs, and also with my own eating habits. And it was hard at times. Like, for a while I was like, oh, raw food, super healthy. And I just overate and I feel sick. Then I would feel guilty. I went through that cycle enough times, and got support from David about it and others. And, eventually got through it and healed it. Right? So the education I got around what to eat, the possibility of cleansing. I remember the first time I heard David talk about an enema, I was like, I don't even know what that is. It just kind of sounds like a dirty word. What's an enema? I don't know. I don't think we talk about those kind of things. Right. And then a coffee enema. And then one of our, maybe our first big trips, we went to the Philippines. It's the first time I'd ever been to Asia. And like long flight, an amazing place. And we're going to lead a retreat in the Philippines. And this is something that also impressed me and amazed me about David. So generous, right? Not only generous as in, do you want to go on this trip? Let's go on this trip. But generous as in, make it amazing, make it fun, right? He, as part of the crew or our team, or even when it was the two of us, like we go out to eat or something like that. The best food we could get, we'd go to these super fancy restaurants, and it was always like, abundant, right? We'd go to these events, and wherever we went for the events, we'd have people hosting us, and they were always people whose lives had been changed by David, right? The healings they'd experienced themselves, the healings their family had experienced, the ways their lives had changed, their businesses, right? And I saw David time after time after time lead an event, right? Maybe do a seminar that was scheduled for 2 hours, and he would speak for 3 hours, and he was so passionate and so educated and giving so much information. People would just be riveted, right? And he'd keep going, and people would be right there with it. The event would end, right? In those days, I'd be in the back of the room helping to sell the superfoods and the things, and people would want those, and they'd met me on stage, so we'd have these great conversations. Meanwhile, David would stay up at the front of the room after speaking for 3 hours straight, and then talk to this person, and he would give them, right, his fullest attention. There are these amazing stories about Bill Clinton. Leave aside all the politics and controversies and all that for a minute. I'm not going to speak about any of that. He had a miraculous way of speaking to people where he was so present, they felt like the most special person on earth. Amazing, right? Stories about this. David was the same, is the same, right? And he would just be so generous. People would say, my mother's suffering from this thing. Okay, well, let's talk about it, and well, let's see what's going on with her nutrition and what kind of treatments. And he was so well versed in, I'd say, alternative medical, but no, really like not just herbs and superfoods and cleansing, but the dangers of so much of what we were brought up with around food and the traditional medicines that are really, I'll leave that aside for now. Like, his generosity with people was phenomenal. I remember one time we had several trips where we went to Miami to lead events. And that was great for me. I'd lived in Miami before. I had friends there. Used to be part of the yoga community. We would go there, and sometimes we'd lead the events at the yoga centers. I was like, oh, David, I know a place I want to take you to. We'd go to Athens Juice Bar, one of my favorite places on earth, because they have this amazing, pineapple mango coconut drink. And we would go there after yoga in the morning. We'd get these drinks that were like as big as my torso, and they were so good. They were sweet and creamy and completely fresh, and each one of them was ridiculously expensive. I don't know, like $25 for a drink, and they were so good. Finish one and be like, I want another. We'd go there, and David just, whatever you want. One time we were staying in New York for an extended time, middle of winter. We were doing events. It was freezing, and we were staying in a friend's house 5 stories up in Soho, and it was fun. It was cool there, but it's cold, and we were working out of the apartment when we weren't doing the events, and I was just like fantasizing. I was like, hey, remember those drinks at Athens? He's like, yeah, let's get some of those. And I'm like, huh? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, can't they ship them to us? I was like, I guess. I was like, but they got to be cold and fresh. He's like, yeah, that's possible. I don't know what it was. He's like, well, if you want to figure it out, I'll pay for it. I'm like, okay. So I call up Athens. They're like, yeah, we could do that. And, and it cost us, I don't know, $70 or something in the shipping. And then we spent $150 on these drinks. And then like a day later, we have these amazing, fresh, like the tropics brought to us. And I was like, wow, never even occurred to me to do something like that, let alone, right, pay for it. Something else I learned from David, though, was the power of, one, in business, over-delivering, right? Just pouring one's heart, giving value, and not because it's going to come back, but because it feels good, because it's the right thing to do, right? To help people, and it always did come back, right? That it was the first time I learned that possibility of just giving and then creating that return flow, right? We were in Las Vegas one time, and we were going to do a raw food event in Las Vegas, and it was just David and I for this event. And I forget who was hosting us, but somehow they put us up in this really fancy hotel, one of the big fancy hotels. And we go to their check in, and the guy that checks us in is this African American guy from, I don't know, Atlanta or something. He had this thick Southern accent, and older guy. And he's checking us. He's bringing us up to our room, and he's, got the push cart with all the stuff. And he's kind of looking at us because we were a bit odd. I was so obsessed with yoga in those days. I was like doing handstand and headstand in airports because we were in airports all the time. And David always was dressed like a character with a like a Peruvian poncho on and an interesting hat and all these colors and jewelry. And so we're checking in. We're not looking like mainstream guys, especially for Las Vegas. And so the guy's like, "What are you guys doing here?" And David says something to him. We're on a raw food mission or something like that, because he was always like in a fun way sharing it with people, giving. It's something I see with one of my mentors now, Steve Hardison. Wherever he goes, he's finding a way to uplift people, giving them a book. Hey, if I give you this book, will you read it? So we ended up having this little funny chat with the guy that's checking us in, and bringing us up to the room. And he's like, "Yeah, I know about raw food." And turns out he has some experience with raw food. And we just had this incredible little conversation with him. And and David always tipped generously, whether it was the airport driver that brought us from the parked car to the terminal, 5 here, 10 there, 20 there. And he gives this guy a $20 bill, right? And again, I came from lower middle class. I'm like, one, I don't even know if we tipped, right? Like my family didn't do that. We're miserly. That's what I grew up with. And if we did tip, it was like a small amount of gesture. David was always in that, like, let's be generous and give more, right? And then after he gave it to him, in beautiful exchange, he's like, "You watch what happens tomorrow at the event." And sure enough, the event we led tomorrow was one of our most successful events ever in attendance, the sales we had, the happiness of the vibe was amazing. So a little more I'm going to share with you. And honestly, I could go on speaking about what I learned from David and what I've seen with him for ages, right? Cacao, though, one of the main staples of my diet now. When I lived in Bali, I had my yoga center there and ran trainings. I also had a little side business, which was a raw cacao chocolate business, right? Which was actually really successful. We made these amazing chocolate bars and sold them. And that grew out of my own passion for raw chocolate, right? And how did I get that? Where did that come from? It was on maybe the second retreat that I was with David on in Hawaii. And I remember this moment so specifically. We're sitting in a hot tub, and our friends, the Coconut Brothers, amazing guys, were there with us, and they lived on Maui, and they climbed trees and delivered coconuts, and they were really into raw foods, and they were there with us. And one of them said to David, it's like, "David, have you ever eaten a raw cacao bean?" David's like, "No." We could just see something was clicking. He's like, "You got to try this." Right. And so he goes back in his bag, and, he just harvested some cacao fruit and gives David the seed. David takes it, looks at it for a second, and then he puts it in his mouth. And it was like this time froze. And the way David spoke of it a few minutes later, he's like, he just had the revelation of like, this is it. Right? This is the greatest superfood ever, raw cacao. Nobody was doing it. Nobody in the world. And this may even be hard to believe right now, right? Because if you've been into the raw food world or the superfood world, raw cacao is everywhere. Everybody and their brother these days is doing ceremonial raw cacao ceremonies. Right? David got the download in that moment and saw this is going to change everything. And what he went through over the course of the next months and even maybe a year or two to track down, specifically in South America, people that were producing high quality organic raw cacao. That was one, right? Because everything that we got chocolate wise in the US at that point was processed, irradiated, heated, treated, pesticided, fungicide, like all this. I mean, it was just so polluted. So we finally tracked down how to get really good, pure raw cacao, especially from farmers. And then this whole like amazing nightmare of how to get it imported to the US safely without all of that, chemical crap treatment stuff. That took ages, took tons of money. David was committed to it and knew, and he saw what it was going to mean, went through all of that. And in the beginning, in those days, right, here's what our ceremonial cacao parties looked like. We were getting raw cacao beans that had the peeling on them, right? That was what we could get. And so we would sit around in a circle, right, whatever crew we had, and we'd have a pile of those, and we'd peel, crack, peel, and it was laborious. It took a long time, but we would do it, whatever group of us, 2 or 5 of us, and we'd sit there and do it until we had enough so we could make a smoothie. And then Dave would go in and make this super food smoothie and make some cacao, put some maca in it, and then we'd have the smoothie and we'd drink it, and we're like, and to feel the benefits and the bliss of that. And then by the time we finished that, we're like, we're back at it, and we're making, peeling more of them. That's how it was for ages, right? And look the way the world's changed in terms of cacao now, right? Phenomenal. And it's that way with many things, with the raw Peruvian olives that he started importing. And something else that I learned from David and saw is his dedication to purity. And I mean purity in the sense of getting the best quality foods. And you can see that now, even in the way he works, that what he produces from his farm in Kauai, the foods that he imports, the superfoods, the herbs, the medicines that he works with world experts on how to get the very best quality. And the last thing I'll say, I saw over the years that people had opinions. And here's the thing. The more we put ourselves forward in the world, right, whether it's Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, the more good we do in the world, the more we bring light, the more people attack us, right, slander us, put us down, right? And I used to see that with David sometimes, people attacking him and complaining. And at first I was like, wow, what's going on with this? Right? What amazed me, though, is didn't let it slow him down, didn't let it bring him down, right? He didn't engage with it. He kept going, kept doing what he was doing. I was like, wow, that's interesting. Years later, I went through something of an experience like that. I ended up getting attacked, trolled, my first cyber attack, and all these people slandering me. And I was so distraught. I didn't like people not liking me, and it wasn't accurate what they were saying. And I didn't know what to do. So I reached out to David. I was like, what do I do? And, he helped me so much to move through that. Right. And at this point, he was at a very high point of fame. He had 13 million followers on Facebook, really in demand. And he then and always takes the time to communicate, right? After our to communicate, to support, to keep up our friendship, right? Even with so many people wanting and demanding his attention, right? Even this last year, I live on Maui. David sometimes is at his place in Kauai, and I sent him an invitation to my birthday party, and he flew over special to come to my party and spent the night, and we had a great time. Again, his generosity and his valuing of people, and his modeling of integrity in the sense of being true to what he says, right? And so many people, and I saw this so much in the yoga world, so many gurus say, do this and be like this. Yet behind the scenes, they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this. So many years when he was really in that raw food guru role, so many people were like, does he ever sneak chips, do this and that? And it just wasn't who he was. He was so able to, and still is, just live who he is purely. and keep serving and keep bringing the light, his ability to learn, research, remember, it's mind-blowing. I'm going to take a quick look at my notes and see if there's anything else. Well, I know there's lots more that I would love to share. Though I think I'll keep it there, right? Because hopefully you get the feeling of this, and there may be other sides to him that I don't know, right? And he's human, like all of us. And I've seen him make mistakes and have challenges, and go through hard times. He used to be part of this company, Sun Food, that he really built from his heart in the early days and built it up. And he experienced a hostile takeover and got kicked out of his own company, essentially. And I've seen him be on the losing end of deals so many times by people that took advantage of his name and his energy, right? And yet he just keeps going, and he gives people the best opportunity, and he partners with people. And I saw many people take advantage of him, steal from him, right? And not that he's a victim of at a certain point, if he sees it, he's like, okay, that's done. But he keeps on going and he stays open. And it's amazing to see that, right? So my experience, yours may be different. I'm curious to hear from you, though. If you know David, how has he impacted your life? How has your life changed because of your connection to him? Something you learned from him. I've met many people who read a book and that changed their life. My own life changed in so many ways for the positive. David, if you're seeing this, thank you. To y'all that are watching, thank you. I love you. See you later. Aloha. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all.